That $7 loaf on the Whole Foods shelf says organic and whole wheat and first certified grocer on the door. Independent labs bought grocery bread off the shelf the way regulators do and tested it for glyphosate, the weed killer in Roundup. The loaf marketed as cleanest came back dirtier than Wonder Bread. You bought whole wheat because you were told it was the healthy choice, with more bran and more fiber. That virtue is exactly why that loaf carried the heaviest load. No one sprayed the bakery case. The wheat was sprayed in the field days before harvest when it should have dried alone. The organic seal bans intentional spraying, but it cannot stop wind. You trust the green seal to mean no poison, and the test suggests the seal is not enough. Walk the bread aisle and every bag looks like the same soft golden pillow that never stales or molds. Real bread is flour, water, yeast, and salt, and it should go hard in 2 days and spot in 4. Take a cheap loaf, press the top with your palm, and watch the crumb collapse and spring back like a kitchen sponge. That bounce is not freshness, it is chemistry engineered to hold air for weeks on a shelf. Flip a bag of Sara Lee soft and smooth and read past sugar and wheat gluten to calcium sulfate. Flip Wonder Bread Classic White and you find the same name between dough conditioners and yeast nutrients. Calcium sulfate is gypsum. The set gypsum patents describe as the major component of paper-faced gypsum board for drywall construction. Food grade is not wallboard, but it is the same compound. A sandwich that needs a construction mineral to stay soft for 21 days is not staying fresh. You want a simple rule to feel safe again. So you reach for organic whole wheat and believe price buys protection. Many videos stop there and say cheap white bread is the problem, and good farmers do not spray. Lab work tells a different story that is hard to ignore once you see the sheets. Independent labs commissioned by the Environmental Working Group tested 45 foods made with conventional oats and found glyphosate in all but 2. About 1/3 of 16 organic oat samples also had glyphosate, but far below the group's benchmark and far below conventional. The Detox Project bought 86 essential grocery foods and tested them like regulators do. More than half came back positive, 45 of 86, and the highest residues were not in white rolls. Whole wheat led the list, and 18 of 26 products labeled non-GMO still contained glyphosate. Why would the healthiest word on the bag test worst, and why would white flour test cleaner than whole grain from the same crop? The answer is not luck. It is a farming practice that concentrates residue where you think the nutrition lives. Farmers spray glyphosate close to harvest to dry wheat evenly, a practice agronomists call pre-harvest desiccation. Joel Ransom, an agronomist at North Dakota State University, said desiccation is done when conditions are wet and the crop is slow to dry down. Harvest can then move 2 weeks early. When grain is sprayed that late, the chemical does not wash off, and milling research shows residue stays highest when crops are desiccated before harvest. The residue soaks into the outer hull, the bran you pay extra to keep, while white flour discards that hull. USDA Organic bans intentional spraying. It does not seal grain against drift or shared handling, which is why 6 of 7 organic products in an early survey still showed traces. The labels look like competition, but the wheat comes from one tight system that shares pools and mills and chemistry. Grupo Bimbo, the largest baking company in the world, reported $22.5 billion in net sales in 2023. It owns Arnold, Sara Lee, and Entenmann's in the United States. Flowers Foods owns Wonder Bread, Nature's Own, and Dave's Killer Bread after buying Hostess assets for $355 million. Analysts note only 3 key players now dominate the United States bread aisle, down from 8 in 2000. That consolidation means the same commodity wheat and the same dough conditioners flow into bags that pose as rivals. Look at Sara Lee's soft and smooth white, enriched wheat flour, sugar, wheat gluten, calcium sulfate, and soybean oil. Look at Wonder Classic White, high fructose corn syrup, soybean oil, calcium sulfate, and soy flour. The shared additive is printed in plain sight, and it keeps soft bread soft long after real bread would harden. Take the loaf that traded on trust and line up a lab sheet beside the claim on the door. The Detox Project paid an accredited lab to buy 86 foods off the shelf exactly as regulators do. That basket ran from bread and pasta to chickpeas and oat cereals. Director Henry Rowlands, who led the testing, said it is not yet possible to set a safe level without bending science. The numbers explain why he said it. Whole Foods 365 whole wheat sandwich bread came back at 1,040 ppb of glyphosate, the second worst bread in the entire test. Village Hearth 100% whole wheat bread was first at 1,150 ppb, followed by that Whole Foods loaf at 1,040 ppb. 18 of 26 products labeled non-GMO still contain glyphosate. That included 2 of the 5 most contaminated at 535 ppb and 1,040 ppb. A separate Florida lab bought 8 loaves and found glyphosate in 6 of 8. Sara Lee honey wheat was 191.04 ppb. Nature's Own butter bread was 190.23 ppb, and Wonder Bread Classic White was 173.19 ppb. Even Organic Dave's Killer whole wheat showed 10 to 136 ppb depending on the lot. You want something you can do at 7 in the morning without a lab coat or a lecture. Open the freezer, not the soft aisle. Real bread belongs in cold because real food molds, and cold is the honest preservative. Pull a frozen loaf and turn the bag. You should count 5 ingredients or fewer, all foods you recognize. Look for wheat, water, yeast, salt, and maybe one sprouted grain, not calcium propionate or DATEM or monoglycerides. Look also for a small seal that says biochecked non-glyphosate certified. That mark means an approved lab tested that lot with LCMS methods down to 0.01 parts per million. That seal started with about 50 products on shelves and now covers 120 companies that passed zero tolerance. 2 frozen sprouted breads were among the first to carry it across their entire range. That is the aisle where non-detect becomes a habit. If bread can sit soft at room temperature for 3 weeks, it is not forgetting to decay. It is engineered not to. The skeptic is not wrong to ask why no one collapses in the aisle if levels sound scary, and that question deserves a straight answer. Every number on those sheets sits below the federal tolerance that allows 30 parts per million, which equals 30,000 parts per billion. Your slice at 4 figures is a fraction of that line, and regulators set that line to cover a lifetime of eating, not one sandwich. The World Health Organization's Cancer Agency, IARC, classified glyphosate in March 2015 as probably carcinogenic to humans, Group 2A. The call was based on limited human evidence and sufficient evidence in animals. The United States Environmental Protection Agency reviewed similar data and called glyphosate not likely to be carcinogenic to humans. The European Chemicals Agency reached the same no-classification conclusion. The risk that worried EWG Vice President Scott Faber was not one loaf. It was daily buildup in children who eat oat cereal, bread and beans. 43 of 45 conventional oat foods had any glyphosate at all. Organic still averaged 50 to 100 times lower, even with drift. Name the loaves that actually failed. Not to shame a baker, but to remember a pattern. Village Hearth 100, whole wheat at 1,150, and Whole Foods 365 at 1,040 led the test. Pepperidge Farm whole grain, Target Market Pantry and Walmart Great Value followed on the same supply. Sara Lee honey wheat, Nature's Own butter bread, Wonder Bread Classic White, Arnold whole grains, and Dave's Killer whole wheat filled the rest of the 10. That is 10 names that share one late spray system, not 10 unrelated accidents. If you want 3 that passed, start frozen and look for the seal. Food for Life Ezekiel 4 verse 9, sprouted whole grain, certified organic and biochecked non-glyphosate certified across 55 products. 1 degree organic sprouted breads, the same zero tolerance check to 0.01 parts per million. And any small batch frozen loaf you find with 5 ingredients or fewer that carries that seal and molds in 5 days on the counter. If it stays pillow soft for 21 days at room temperature, it is not bread that forgot to rot. Europe just renewed that chemical for 10 more years while United States tolerances sit where they were in the 90s. No one will retest your loaf next month or post a new sheet by the dairy case. The cleanest loaves now need a seal. The softest aisle needs none. Buy bread that hardens, that molds, that lives in the freezer until you toast it. Count 5 ingredients or fewer, and look for the biochecked mark at 0.01 parts per million. Let the crumb that does not bounce tell you it is food. If the cleanest bread needs a seal to prove it, what does that say about the field?